Welcome to I-24 News. This is Middle East Now. I'm your host, Bianca Zanini. Tonight's edition will focus on the ceasefire and hostages deal between Hamas and Israel, expected to be announced within hours. I-24 News has heard from a senior U.S. official that a deal has been reached. The Qatari Prime Minister is expected to speak at any moment now, with rumors swirling that he will announce the agreement. After more than a year of a devastating war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, with immense suffering on both sides, the deal could see the first round of hostages go free as early as Sunday and would see an initial 6-week ceasefire. Joining me in the studio now is Dan Perry, international affairs analyst and former Europe and Middle East editor at the Associated Press. I-24 News Middle East correspondent Ariel Oseran and correspondent Nicole Zedek. Thank you guys for joining me tonight. Certainly an exciting moment, a lot of breaking news coming out. What do we know about the deal that is currently on the table and currently potentially just minutes or hours away from being announced?
Well, it looks like it's a multi-phase deal where the first phase will be 42 days, and during which time 33 of the hostages, some of whom will not be alive probably, will be released. Whereby if all the phases actually are implemented, and it's a big if, then this will be the end of the war, because Israel, as far as we know, is agreeing to pull the IDF out of Gaza and end the war. So I can think of two things to say. One is wonderful that this is happening at last. There will be jubilation in Israel, and I suspect in Gaza. But the other thing is, incredibly, 1 month after Netanyahu told the Wall Street Journal that he would never end the war leaving Hamas in power in Gaza, that is precisely what he's doing. And this is happening largely by Israel's design, because there was, I think, coast-to-coast agreement across planet Earth that this war needs to end, with Hamas no longer in power in Gaza, and only one entity stood in the way of that, as far as I can tell, other than perhaps Hamas itself, and that is the government of Israel. I
want to ask you, we've been seeing reports all day. A ceasefire has been reached, an agreement has been reached, and then another report saying, no, Israel is blaming Hamas, saying that they are adding new demands. Hamas saying Israel is adding new demands. Why this insecurity and uncertainty until the very last moment, and all of these reports swirling around? The Qatari Prime Minister, expected to speak, has postponed his speech already by an hour.
All of the parties right now are trying to paint this as a victory for themselves. Hamas is trying to paint it as a victory inside Gaza and the West Bank. The Arab mediators and the United States are trying to paint it as a victory of diplomatic means. And even Israel is trying to paint this as a victory of finally returning the 98 hostages home. However, when it comes to a ceasefire of this to actually come to completion, it's not actually a victory for any of the parties. Every party has to compromise and give in to something so that the other party will also agree to it. And so that's what we're still seeing up until the very last minute. We're going to continue to see all of the sides try to paint this like they are the ones winning. It will be interesting to see even what comes after this, as no side truly feels like they are winning. Because even though we will see probably jubilations through the streets of Gaza and the West Bank, at what cost are all of these Palestinian security prisoners being released over what's happening inside Gaza? Meanwhile, here in Israel, for these hostages that are being released, we still do not know which ones are alive and which ones are going to be coming back dead. And that's going to be very, very difficult for the Israeli public to comprehend and to realize exactly what is going to happen in the coming days.
Right. We have reports that at least 23 of the 33 hostages that are expected to be released in the first phase are alive. These are unconfirmed reports. But I want to go now live to our reporter in the field, Robert Swift, who's with us from Hostages Square in Tel Aviv. A lot of emotions coming from the relatives of the hostages. They've released a statement just a short while ago. Robert, what's the latest?
That's right. Representatives of the hostages family welcoming the expected announcement of a breakthrough in the negotiations. However, also stressing the fact that that all of the hostages need to get out, not just the 23 or the 33 that we were just referring to, but additional the full gambit of the hostages who remain inside the Gaza Strip. In order for that to happen, the the lull in fighting, the ceasefire, will need to survive not just the first phase, but also the second and the third phase. Unclear at this stage if that will take place. The details of the first phase of the negotiation have been much more locked in place, with the second phase where the male Israeli soldiers who are held hostage in Gaza will be released for an as yet undefined number of Palestinian prisoners. That detail still has to be pinned down, and it's catching points like that that may cause friction within the negotiations down the line after this evening, if a breakthrough is achieved tonight.
All right, Robert, and I want to ask you about the atmosphere on the ground there. We know that Israelis are preparing to take to the streets, waiting for this announcement to happen. We've seen protests against the deal, protests for the deal in the last few days. What are we seeing there on Hostages Square, and what can we expect to see tonight and in the coming days?
Yeah, when we've been here previously, moments like this where over a year ago, when there was a release of hostages, and other moments throughout the year where it's been hoped that such things have happened. Often it's been surprisingly quiet here within the square. A lot of Israelis are glued to their phones rather than immediately coming out to this location in the hours leading up to an announcement. At the moment, it is still relatively quiet here, but as you say, that is likely to change if and when an announcement is made tonight.
All right, Robert Swift, live with us from Tel Aviv, Hostages Square. Thank you very much for your update. And we go now back to the studio where Dan Perry, Arlo Ossoran, and Nicole Zedek are joining me here to discuss. Dan, I want to ask you, here in Israel, the deal is largely being framed as a hostages deal. That has been the focus here, but it includes so many other things, like you mentioned, the idea of troops leaving Gaza, a ceasefire. And I want to now tell breaking news to our viewers here. I just heard in my ear that U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has confirmed that a deal has been reached between Israel and Hamas. We will continue to cover this and bring you the latest news. Dan, back to you in the studio. This deal, how is it being seen within Israel at this moment? Is it an opportune time for Israel, 5 days away from the Trump inauguration?
Yeah, look, polls have shown consistently that nearly 3/4 of Israelis wanted the deal to happen, understanding that it basically means that the second condition that Israel had set for ending the war way in the beginning, in addition to returning the hostages, which was removing Hamas from power in Gaza, would not be achieved probably. So Israelis, I think, are unhappy about that, but they still accept the deal because there is a sense that the hostages have been for too long not prioritized, and it is critical for the cohesion of society in Israel to do anything possible and to almost pay any price in order to bring them back. So there is, I think, joy, and there will be support for this deal. The recriminations about the context in which it was made will come down the line. As for Trump, there had been an expectation that Israel would not agree to a final deal before Trump enters office because of a notion that Trump would remove all guardrails and enable Israel to put even more pressure on Hamas, maybe enable Israel to slow down humanitarian aid, and in short, to do more in Gaza. And therefore, I think many people in Israel are legitimately surprised that a final deal is being reached before Trump enters office. And of course, the reason for that appears to be that Trump sent his envoy Witkoff to Israel to make very clear to Netanyahu that there is nothing to wait for and that he needs to sign a deal. As far as I can tell, Trump is the reason why we have this deal present.
And I want to update our viewers here with the statement from Trump. He posted on social media, "We have a deal for the hostages in the Middle East. They will be released shortly. Thank you." And we also have an update here from the Israelis. The cabinet is supposed to meet tomorrow morning to sign and approve the deal. Now, back to you in studio. Ariel, I want to ask from you, what does this deal mean for Israel's large, overall war goals?
Well, the war goals were to dismantle Hamas's military and governing capabilities in the Gaza Strip and to bring back the hostages. And so it did achieve the goal of dismantling Hamas's military capabilities, albeit U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken confirmed yesterday that almost all the fighters of Hamas that Israel has killed during the war, they managed to recruit a similar number into their ranks. But in terms of the military apparatus, the battalion structure, the command and control, that is no longer in place. So that goal was achieved. Whether all the hostages will indeed be released in this deal, because it's a phased deal with many exit points, that still remains to be seen. As for Hamas's governing capabilities, they are still governing the Gaza Strip, and an Israeli withdrawal without placing an alternative governing body in its place, that indicates that Hamas is expected to remain in control of the Gaza Strip administratively. We know that the second phase of the deal is expected to also include negotiations regarding the day after, and there's this UAE plan and perhaps an Arab peacekeeping force. That is still not even set on paper, let alone put in place and beginning to be activated. So most of the goals, 50% of the goals, you can say, have been achieved, and now this deal is expected to bring home the hostages, which, at least according to Israeli military and security officials, saying that this is the most imperative goal of them all right now.
All right. Well, right now is just part of a longer picture. I want to ask you, Nicole, there's been a lot of focus from the Trump administration on pressuring Hamas. And if a deal isn't reached, all hell will break loose in the Middle East. And the focus has been that Trump is coming in and putting pressure on Hamas. But how much pressure has the Trump administration and his team actually been putting on Netanyahu to reach this deal?
I think that's the majority of the pressure, and what really changed at the end of the day is because although there was all of this statement, and I do think that people should take the Trump administration for its word that things could likely have changed if a deal was not reached by the time that he was in office. And we don't know what type of military pressure Trump would not only allow Israel to enact inside the Gaza Strip, but possibly even the United States themselves. And so it did not come to that based on the Trump administration. As Dan Perry mentioned, just over the weekend, Trump's Mideast envoy, Steve Witkoff, was here on Saturday speaking with Netanyahu, and this was said to be a very tense meeting between the two.
Right. He reportedly told Netanyahu that he had to meet now, even though it was during Shabbat hours, and Netanyahu went ahead and broke his Shabbat.
Exactly, and this was following Witkoff's past meetings where he had been for a week in Doha, actually on the ground, speaking with mediators, learning about this deal and seeing what needed to be implemented. So after going on the ground in Doha, he then came here for a quick visit to meet with Netanyahu right away. And it's said that during that meeting, some of these reports state that in one single sit-down meeting with the incoming Trump administration, more got done than the entire year and plus that we'd seen with the Biden administration. And so I think this does go to show not only the pressure that the Trump administration has on top of Netanyahu right now, but it also does show Netanyahu's wanting to abide and appease the incoming Trump administration. They want to see this growing relationship because there is the possibility for one of the most pro-Israel administrations to be coming into the White House, but that does not come without any caveats. And so this was the major caveat for the Trump administration to say, okay, look, we're going to support you on all of your future military endeavors. When it does come to this, we're not going to hold you back as we continue to hear from many of Trump's envoy picks. However, this needs to happen before Trump is in office, and it seems like that pressure certainly worked.
All right, and I want to update our viewers once again to let them know that the Qatari Prime Minister is expected to speak at any moment now. He is expected to announce the ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. Until then, we will, of course, be here in the studio and we'll bring you live from Doha. Now, Dan, you had an addition to this comment.
Yeah, it perhaps should come as no surprise. Nicole's absolutely right. There had been expectation that the pressure would be coming from Trump on Hamas by allowing Israel to escalate. But I always suspected that the Israeli right wing might be a little bit too optimistic in this regard, because Netanyahu had engineered a situation in the war that was leading to something close to permanent war, a nonstop guerrilla war against Hamas that enables Netanyahu politically to delay the accounting over October 7th and to keep his government together because the far right opposed an end to the war, because they have dreams of settling Gaza with Jews and so forth. Now, this is horribly cynical, but I think half of Israel believes that's what was happening. That is in a head-on collision with Trump. that basically has been stating very clearly that he wants the Gaza war to end on day one, similarly to his desire for the Ukraine war to end. So he's batting 500 now, because it kind of looks like he was very serious about this and put the squeeze on Netanyahu to basically reorganize his priorities. And Netanyahu will now have to explain why he's violating his promise to leave Gaza with Hamas not in power. I suspect that the deal might fall apart in phases 2 and 3 because there is vagueness on whether indeed there's going to be talks on a day after. There's going to be talks on modalities of who supervises what movement to Palestinians, but it's very vague on a day after. If Netanyahu resumes his insistence that Hamas not be in charge while also maintaining his opposition to the Palestinian Authority being in charge, that catch-22 would prolong the war and probably bring the ceasefire deal crashing down.
All right, and as we're holding our breath to hear an announcement from Qatar, let's go live to our Washington correspondent, Mike Wagenheim, with us from the State Department in Washington. Mike, what came out of the Trump administration now announcing this deal?
First off, a couple things with the current Biden administration. A senior U.S. official has confirmed a ceasefire deal has been reached. The State Department here has issued no on-the-record comment as of yet. Meanwhile, Donald Trump on his Truth Social account issuing a message just a few moments ago. I'm quoting here, "We have a deal for the hostages in the Middle East. They will be released shortly. Thank you." That's quote-unquote the message from President-elect Donald Trump. No further detail coming from that yet. There was a statement issued a few moments ago we received from the New York-based Hostage Family Forum. They say, "We share this news cautiously with a mix of anticipation, excitement, and an unwavering commitment to our cause." They say they're going to anxiously await the reunions of families with their loved ones, and they will continue to stand by the families until all of them are home. That's what's happening here on the home front in the United States so far. Again, nobody has gone on the record yet from the Biden administration to indicate that a ceasefire deal has been reached. A senior administration official being quoted on background so far confirming it.
All right, Mike, and I wanted to ask you exactly about that because we're 5 days away from the Trump administration taking over. How much of a win can the Biden administration claim for this deal?
They'll claim however much they want to claim and however much people are willing to give them credit for. I think it's not something you can just take and say it's ours. It kind of needs to be assigned to you as credit. So those who are with the Biden admin, I think will give him credit. Those that are with the Trump admin, I think will give them credit. But I think there is at least some to be shared here. The Biden admin, I think, did the bulk of the load here. It's not denigrating the Trump admin. Biden admin was just the one in power for so long, and this essentially was their deal that they tried to ram down Israel's throats last year. The Trump administration now, in a more forceful manner, apparently, is able to make things happen. It leaves open questions about why the Biden admin didn't leverage the power that the Trump admin apparently is, or whether Prime Minister Netanyahu and the current Israeli government just feels more fearful of the ramifications from the Trump admin than they have the Biden admin over the last year or so, as these negotiations have been ongoing here. But both sides, I guarantee you, this is politics and this is big news. They'll be grabbing all the credit they can.
Right. And I want to ask you, Mike, looking forward now, we've had the Trump administration putting pressure, like you mentioned, pressure that we didn't see from the Biden administration, both on Hamas but also on Netanyahu. What does this indicate for the future relationship between Trump and Netanyahu?
You know, it's interesting because you mentioned the word credit, and I'm not so sure in some circles, even in some pro-Trump circles, that they see this as a creditable action. Remember, it was pro-Israel supporters, especially on the Republican side, who were criticizing Biden for so long for this exact deal that Trump is now vouching for and saying it was a stab in the back to Israel. So the question is now, what are they thinking about Trump's actions in enforcing that same deal upon Israel? What does it mean for the broader Trump-Netanyahu relationship? I think another unanswered question that will have an impact is there something that was promised to Netanyahu and to the Israelis in order to get them to sign off on this deal? Or was it pure pressure? Was it maybe a promise in terms of sanctioning or taking action or backing Israeli action against Iran? Was it maybe a promise to back a settlement expansion in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank? Was there some give and take here? If it was simply, hey, you're signing this deal or else, that was supposed to be the pressure that was applied to Hamas. If that's what's being forced upon Netanyahu, I think Netanyahu is finding out exactly what some critics said was going to happen. That no matter how many accomplishments Trump had and how much he put his neck out in terms of the first term of the U.S.-Israel relationship, the moving of the embassy, the assassination of Soleimani, the recognition of the sovereignty over the Golan Heights, the brokering of the Abraham Accords. We can go on and on. Some critics said eventually Trump will be Trump and he'll look out for himself rather than Israeli interest. And this may be that first occasion where we're seeing that, and that would not obviously bode so well for future Trump-Netanyahu engagements, so to speak, going forward.
All right, Mike Wagenheim, live with us from the State Department in Washington. Thank you very much. Now, Dan, while Mike was speaking here, you were nodding your head and you were showing that you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I agree with him, but I want to add that there is a strong element here of Israeli politics, because the Likud party base, the right-wing Israel, sort of views Biden almost as a member of the Israeli opposition. Capitulation to Biden would have gone down very, very poorly. Acquiescence to Trump somehow can be spun as part of some strategic grand design, because Trump will doubtless reward Israel whether or not anything was actually promised. For example, a freer hand in expanding settlements in the West Bank. The government will imply that it was. And the people, the base at least, will sort of believe it. So basically it was easier to accept the exact same thing from Trump that Biden had to work so hard for and basically failed for over a year to impose on Israel.
I will quickly add that while we are comparing this to the deal that Biden did first put forward back in May, we do have to realize that even if it is a similar outline of the deal, the entire Middle East arena has changed so much since then. Yahya Sinwar is no longer alive. The main leader of Hamas, all of the main leaders of Hamas, both inside Gaza and outside Gaza. How about Lebanon as well? The main leaders there. Iran is weaker than it has ever been. And so there's so much more at stake here also that has truly, I think, led to this, along with this pressure coming from the Trump administration. And so even though it might be a similar, if not the same deal, the entire region has changed, and that could have also catapulted this acceptance by Israel right now to finally accept the terms of the deal.
All right, and the cabinet is set to meet tomorrow in Israel to approve the deal. And voices inside the Israeli government coalition have strongly opposed any deal with Hamas up until now. Just yesterday, far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir spoke out vehemently against the deal and even said that he'd managed to derail a deal many times in the past. So what can we expect to see now in the next coming days, and how could this deal affect the government, and more specifically, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu? Here in the studio, still with me, Dan Perry, Ariel Osran, and Nicole Zedek. Dan, what are we hearing now from the halls of power, and what are we going to see in the next few days?
Well, the two right-wing boogeymen in the coalition, the Finance Minister Smotrich and National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, are both opposed to the deal. They wanted, indeed, the same forever war that I was saying earlier today that Netanyahu appears to have given them. They don't want the war to end. They want to resettle Gaza with Jews. So they're going to oppose it. Smotrich himself called it a national security catastrophe for Israel, no less. But will they bring down the government? Theoretically, both of them combined, if their people will go with them, do have the ability to bring down the government. But that would trigger elections probably. And all the polls showed that the right wing as a whole would lose such elections. And I think the prospect of being in opposition might focus the minds of politicians to such an extent that they actually are willing to have their bluff be called. They'll vote against it. I'd be surprised if they bring down the government.
All right, and Ariel, I wanted to ask you, we're hearing that the release of the hostages could happen as soon as this Sunday, but when the ceasefire is set to begin, we're hearing different reports. What do we know?
Right. So while Al Jazeera, Qatari-owned Al Jazeera, is reporting that the Gaza ceasefire is expected to begin within 2 to 3 days, Saudi Arabia is reporting that the Rafah border crossing will open as early as tomorrow, and that is a step that's supposed to take place on the first day of the deal. So there's a flurry of reports coming out. as we've been saying in the months leading up to this, if we hear anything official, it'll be first and foremost from the Qataris, as we see the empty podium waiting to hear from Mohammed Al Thani, the Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Qatar, the official negotiator on behalf of Qatar. He is expected to not only announce officially that the deal was reached, but also to divulge the information, because, again, no one has seen officially the document that we're all referring to. I mean, yesterday it was leaked by Palestinian sources. I've read the document, but it hasn't been corroborated because the sides still haven't agreed to it, at least until this past hour. So there are many moving pieces, many conflicting reports. We need to tread very cautiously here, because not only are these very complicated details moving forward, but also these are the lives of hostages, of Israelis on the line, and we know that the families of the hostages are clinging to every piece of information that they can get. So we want to make sure that what we give is official, is confirmed, and unfortunately we won't be able to do that until we hear from that from the Qatari Prime Minister, who will reach that podium hopefully sooner rather than later.
Right, and reports are saying that at least 23 of the 33 hostages are expected to be released in the first phase of the deal, the so-called humanitarian phase, are considered to be alive. Israelis have spent the last months holding their breath for the latest updates from the war in Gaza. In the last few days, Israelis have voiced both hope for the return of hostages and a ceasefire, as well as frustration and worry, fearing Hamas's revival in future attacks. Here is what some of them had to say.
Israelis are taking to the streets in anticipation of a ceasefire deal in Gaza, but public opinion is deeply divided. Thousands rallied in Tel Aviv on Tuesday night, urging an agreement to secure the release of hostages held by Hamas and other terror groups in Gaza.
I, Moran, a Hamas captivity survivor, appeal to you, the international community, with a simple yet urgent plea. Help us. Help us bring the hostages back home.
The status of the hostages in Gaza remains uncertain. Out of 98, at least 36 are believed to be dead. Families are left in limbo.
I don't know what's his situation, so I try not to prepare, because what I'll prepare? To a funeral and to a celebration together?
It is widely reported that 33 hostages will be released in the first stage of the deal, but questions loom about the fate of the others.
I'm a mother of Tamir. He's a young soldier, so we're probably will be left to the next stage, and we're very worried that we won't get to the next stage.
At the same time, many Israelis are strongly against the proposed deal.
It's a spit in the face for everyone who gave their life for us. They fought for nothing, and it hurts.
Some demand that all the hostages be released at once.
I would have preferred, of course, for all the hostages to be completely freed. Those who will remain will either rot or die in Hamas jails. And the price we'll pay will be exorbitant, monetized against the release of 1,600 terrorists.
Others worry the deal will enable Hamas to regroup and strike again.
We know what the reality is, that released murderers want to murder us again and again and again. And if we set more of these people out, we know what, God forbid, will be the result. Will be more dead Jews, more dead people.
I'm very disappointed in Trump. I voted for him, and I had my entire family vote for him. I feel like he's not supporting us right now. When we need to make sure that we win this war.
As the nation debates the cost of negotiation, the voices of those directly affected remind us of the human stakes behind the headlines.
And still with me in the studio is Dan Perry, Ariel Osran, and Nicole Zedek. Ariel, we heard some of the worries here presented by some of the Israelis out on the streets protesting. One of them is the possibility for Hamas to regroup. What do we know so far from the reports and from what we've been informed of this deal? What do we know? Which steps are being taken to prevent that from happening?
So first of all, as Secretary of State Antony Blinken said yesterday, Hamas has pretty much regrouped in terms of its manpower. It has managed to recruit a similar, if not the same amount of fighters that it has lost to by Israeli forces. That's again in terms of the manpower. Yeah.
Is that surprising? Is this something that Israel was expecting?
I think it's not surprising because in terms of the economic opportunities in the Gaza Strip, there aren't any, especially not in the time of war. And Hamas, they have an open channel of funds coming in through the humanitarian aid that they sell and gain a profit by. They use that money to regroup, to rearm itself. The question is, beyond the manpower, in terms of their weapons manufacturing capabilities, in terms of smuggling weapons into the Gaza Strip, that is expected to be addressed by agreements between Israel and Egypt. That's what makes Egypt such a critical element in these negotiations, because those understandings between Jerusalem and Cairo, those are most critical for Israel's strategic interests moving forward. What kind of mechanisms will there be in the Rafah border crossing to prevent arms from going in the legitimate kosher route, so to speak, above ground, and also what is being done to prevent the emergence of new underground tunnels between Gaza and Egypt. These are things that are going to need to be and are already being discussed between Israel and Egypt with American oversight. But in terms of we talked about this leaked document regarding the draft proposal. So it doesn't really include too many details beyond that, but it does say that the reconstruction plan of Gaza and oversight of what will happen in the Gaza Strip is going to be overseen by Egypt, Qatar, and the UN, with the United States serving as a guarantor to the agreement. So we still, again, haven't seen an official text outlining what these understandings are, but these are more on the Israel-Egypt avenue as opposed to the indirect Israel-Hamas negotiations that have brought forth this framework agreement that is expected to be announced any moment in Doha.
All right, and when discussing the current deal, a key question looming over everything, of course, is what happens next? Who will govern Gaza? Palestinian Authority Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa said at a conference in Oslo that the PA is the legitimate leadership of the Palestinians and will therefore be the only rulers of Gaza. Let's take a listen.
While we're waiting for the ceasefire, it's important to stress that it will not be acceptable for any entity to govern Gaza Strip but the legitimate Palestinian leadership and the government of the State of Palestine. Any attempt to consolidate the separation between the West Bank and the Gaza Strip or create transitional entities will be rejected.
Now, Ariel, can the PA in its current form, is it likely to take over the power in Gaza and keep it?
Well, it really is a question. Can it? It depends on who will allow it to. And that is also who you ask. If you ask the Americans, they are definitely down with allowing the Palestinian Authority, who they see as the only legitimate sovereign body to administer post-war Gaza. Israel, on the other hand, has constantly said, Israeli leaders, mainly Prime Minister Netanyahu, saying that they will not allow the Palestinian Authority to assume control of the Gaza Strip. Obviously, Washington has said that they want to see widespread reforms in the Palestinian Authority, which has been riddled with corruption for decades, leading to the diminishing support among ordinary Palestinians. Prime Minister Mustafa responded to those claims, saying that in the past year they have been engaging in comprehensive reforms. Obviously, that's hard to believe coming from the man who is in the PA himself. But I don't think this is the last word has been said regarding the PA's involvement in post-war Gaza. And again, we have not even begun implementing the first phase of the deal, when on day 16 they're expected to only begin specific negotiations for phase 2 and the day after. So we are still a long ways ahead from really determining who will administer post-war Gaza.
All right, and joining now the discussion is Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib, a Gazan writer, analyst, and senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We heard the Prime Minister of the PA. We heard Israel pushing back, if not the PA, if not the Hamas. What do Gazans see as a possible or welcome leadership for the Strip after this war?
Thanks for having me. This is the million-dollar question. On the one hand, the Palestinian Authority is a necessary framework financially from a legal point of view. It enjoys international recognition and access to frameworks that can enable the funneling of funds and resources for the reconstruction of Gaza. On the other hand, the Palestinian Authority lacks the infrastructure in the Gaza Strip to be able to credibly come in there and assume responsibility in a way that displaces Hamas's 17 or 18-year grip on power. One of the unfortunate things about the Palestinian Authority is that, on the one hand, it actually, over the years, and I know this having, I know Mr. Mustafa personally from past years, and having engaged the Palestinian Authority, they want the control or dominion, I should say, over Gaza as part of their aspiration to achieve a two-state solution. On the other hand, they very much so look at Gaza as a kind of like the stepson, if you will, a trouble zone that has been renegade, that has gone completely rogue, and they're not really interested in a creative solutions beyond the old frameworks of we're just going to move the infrastructure from the West Bank and take over the Gaza Strip. They're not very inspiring. They're not compelling. And so we're in this impossible situation where there's no sustainable, durable recovery and rejuvenation of Gaza without PA involvement. On the other hand, the PA in its current form is woefully incapable of being actually helpful in the recovery.
All right, we're showing now on the screen, as the viewers just saw here, live images from Gaza. Mohammed Mustafa saying that there should be no division between Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. Clearly there is, clearly for the situation on the ground as well. How much is that sentiment reflected in the Gazan population?
Well, ironically, on the one hand, there absolutely is division between Gaza and the West Bank, and not just geographic and not just political, but even aspirational, even I would argue culturally. I grew up in Gaza, my family's there, and there are completely different cultural heritages, if you will, between folks in the Gaza Strip and folks in the West Bank. People in Gaza, for example, because Gaza is a very well-defined space, I think it's easy to envision the coastal enclave being redeveloped and becoming the pride and joy of the Palestinian people, becoming the kind of the jewel of a future Palestinian entity that becomes the state of Palestine. On the other hand, you look at the West Bank, and it's difficult with the settlements and the military occupation to envision what that looks like. I will also add, people in Gaza, after years of subjugation under Hamas's rule, they are in fact ready for the Palestinian Authority to assume responsibility. They are in fact eager for somebody other than Hamas to be a part of the reconstruction and recovery and building state institutions and nation building. And I don't know how much of that is love for the Palestinian Authority as much as it is just a desperate desire for an alternative to Hamas's Islamism, to being aid-dependent subjects who are relying on UNRWA and the NGO industrial complex that has proliferated since Hamas took over.
Right.
And so there really is this conundrum, once again, of people remember the corruption of the Palestinian Authority, but they would sometimes tell you, we would much rather that over endless wars and cycles of violence that get us destroyed, that squander billions of dollars of our people's resources. I will also add that, unfortunately, under the policies of the current Israeli government, there have been deliberate attempts to prevent the Palestinian Authority from exercising any meaningful return to the Gaza Strip. And there have been, I would say, an attempt to use a 3D chess game, if you will, of playing Hamas against the PA to keep the Palestinians politically divided. And that's not minimizing Palestinian agency or responsibility for where we're at. I'm simply saying that some of where we're at right now in terms of the lack of legitimacy and credibility that the PA has among its people in the West Bank, but also in terms of its capabilities and capacity in the Gaza Strip, is part of a deliberate Israeli strategy that Mr. Prime Minister has promulgated and promoted. And should we want to see a shift, there will have to be a political decision in Israel to allow for some creative, new, fresh, out-of-the-box thinking.
All right, Ahmed, stay with us. I want to bring in now another part of the deal that we haven't discussed yet, the release of some 1,000 Palestinian prisoners for the 33 hostages. Israel has vetoed 72 names, with 8 being some of the most notorious terrorists Israel has jailed. Our reporter Emma Siegel has the details.
As part of the ongoing negotiations for a hostage deal, Hamas has submitted a list of Palestinian prisoners it demands to have released from Israeli prisons, including senior terrorists serving life sentences and the body of Yahya Sinwar. Sinwar was the architect of the October 7th massacre and leader of Hamas in the Gaza Strip until he was killed by IDF troops in October. He was handed 4 life sentences by Israel in 1988 before his release during the Gilad Shalit deal in 2011.
Unfortunately, after Gilad Shalit deal, he was released. I myself was against, the release of Yahya Sinwar, because I knew if he will be outside, he will make a lot of trouble for the Israelis.
Now, Israel is again facing the same dilemma of releasing terrorists with the blood of Israelis on their hands and vetoing 72 names, with 8 being some of the most notorious terrorists that Israel has imprisoned. Marwan Barghouti, the former Secretary General of Fatah in the West Bank, he was arrested in 2002 after orchestrating terror attacks that killed 5 Israelis and injured several others. Barghouti has emerged as a front-runner to replace current Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. Also on the veto list is Abdallah Barghouti, a former commander of Hamas's military wing in the West Bank. Known as Hamas's engineer, he was a bomb maker responsible for the death of over 60 Israelis during the Second Intifada. He is currently serving an unprecedented 67 life sentences, which is 5,200 years. Ahmed Sadat, the former head of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, organized the assassination of former tourism minister Rehavam Ze'ev in 2001. Israel is also refusing to release Ibrahim Hamed, the mastermind behind most of the suicide bombings during the Second Intifada and who led Hamas's Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade in the West Bank during that time. He held the significant position of second in command within the terrorist organization in the West Bank, behind Salah al-Aruri, who was killed in Beirut in 2023. Abbas al-Sayed orchestrated the 2002 Passover massacre at a Netanyahu hotel. The devastating suicide bombing attack killed 30 and injured 140 in one of the deadliest terror attacks of the Second Intifada. Following the attack, Israel declared a state of emergency and, after calling up 20,000 IDF reservists, launched a large-scale counter-terrorism raid in the West Bank. This was the first time the IDF invaded the area since the Oslo Accords. Also on Israel's veto list is Mahmoud Issa, who participated in the abduction and killing of Israeli soldier Nassim Toledano and attempted killing of 2 other soldiers. And finally, brothers Muaz and Othman Bilal. The 2 were part of Israel's broader campaign against members of Hamas and its military networks during the early 2000s amid the Second Intifada. The brothers were accused of playing key roles in Hamas's military wing. As Israel is refusing to release these prisoners, it is unclear how this may affect the ongoing negotiations and emerging hostage deal.
And we go back now to Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib, a Gazan writer, analyst, and senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. The big question I want to ask you now is, how is this deal being received in Gaza?
Well, I'm going to share with you some unpopular views that other Palestinian analysts might not like to hear. But I look at a lot of social media. I look at a lot of Arabic source material of Palestinians across the political spectrum. And there is concern that, Hamas is going with some, not all, with some of these individuals who are going to be released, going to be able to replenish its bench of extreme leaders. Many of these individuals who come out of prison, they have a lot of psychological challenges. They've been isolated. They have a very warped view of the world. They then assume a lot of power. They assume a lot of control. And they end up basically pushing Hamas or other groups even further into an extreme direction, like we saw with Yahya Sinwar. And so I've actually seen several Palestinians commenting about kind of the long-term impact of having some of those folks dumped into Gaza, if you will. And again, I'm talking about some of the more senior kind of heavyweights, if you will, that
Ahmed,
Hamas
I
is
just
insisting on.
want to interrupt you for a second. You'll get to speak again. I just want to tell our viewers that they're seeing right now a split screen of live images from Tel Aviv right now and from Gaza, as we expect to see, as we await to hear from the Qatari Prime Minister an announcement of the deal between Israel and Hamas. Ahmed, back to you now. We were talking about how this deal is being received in Gaza and focusing on the Palestinian prisoners to be released.
Certainly. And actually, before I go back to the prisoners point, I shared this on X yesterday, and I want to make clear that there's a difference between the Palestinian peoples in Gaza in particular, their jubilance with the end of the war versus what constitutes celebration. And I said they're not one and the same, even though Hamas and its propaganda and Qatari state media, aka Al Jazeera, will try to frame it as such. But it is absolutely not the case that Gazans are going to be celebrating. No one is celebrating the destruction of 75% of Gaza. No one is celebrating the death of tens of thousands, such that of the 2.3 million people who live in Gaza, basically everybody knows someone or has family members who have been killed or wounded. No one is celebrating the 15 months of immense trauma, the worst trauma in the entirety of their lifetime. So I want to make clear, however, that what we will see are the jubilations over the fact that maybe we'll have a chance to live. Maybe we'll have an opportunity to access a different future, a better future. Going back to the issue of the prisoners, and yes, the issue of prisoners being unfairly and unjustly held by Israel is one thing, versus those who have been affiliated with Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and some of the other groups. There is concern among some Palestinians that those guys will yet again feed the next generation of extreme leadership among Hamas and others. There's also another kind of bigger picture, picture consideration, which is, you know, at what price are these folks being released? At the price of tens of thousands of people being killed, all the children and women, all the annihilation of Gaza's people, and Gaza sitting in ruins. I mean, 20 years, we're coming up on the 20 years since the withdrawal of Israeli settlements in 2005.
Right.
And I left Gaza one month before the withdrawal, and I was supposed to go back. But it's like, where are we? Where are our people? Like, no one is celebrating deep down their heart the state of affairs in the Palestinian society. There is, however, hope, and I share that. And like I said, I have family there. I talk to them. I have friends and allies, and I helped extract family. I lost 33 of my own family, okay? This is extremely painful and extremely emotional and personal. And yet I am relieved that maybe there's a pathway to something other than what we have experienced over the past 15 years. Yes, Hamas is tactically weakened, but let's not kid ourselves. I was with Secretary Blinken yesterday when he gave his farewell address, and when he announced it at the Atlantic Council, and I had a chance to speak to him beforehand. And it is, in fact, the assessment of, I mean, we saw the day before even, the Wall Street Journal came out with a piece, and then he went on stage and said that we assess that Hamas has been able to recruit almost as many fighters as it has lost. And it's like, think of all the 17 and 18-year-olds with no horizon. They lost their families. They lost everything. Like, what else is there for them to do? And so this is where visions about Gaza's transformation, not just reconstruction, recovery, rejuvenation, reconstituting what Gaza is. And unfortunately, the Israeli war strategy, as was warned by Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, has turned a tactical victory into a strategic defeat. And I don't mean, unfortunately, Hamas is still in control. You had to negotiate with Hamas to release the hostages. The military attack has failed ultimately in freeing the hostages, with the exception of like 5 to 6 cases. And so, considering the cost to Israel's, the number of soldiers who've been killed, the just billions of dollars and the drain that it has been on the GDP and on the state budget, Israel's standing in the world,
Right.
the amount of isolation has failed, it's extremely painful that we're back in a situation where Hamas will exercise dominion over Gazans despite all the losses.
So let's hope that it goes in the right direction for all of us. Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib, thank you very much for joining us. I want to remind our viewers that we are still waiting for the Qatari Prime Minister to go up and speak and announce a ceasefire and hostages deal between Israel and Hamas. And I want to add now that we have a little more information from Donald Trump, who now has posted that what he called an epic ceasefire agreement that could only have happened due to his victory in the elections in November. He also thanked his security team and said that they will continue to work closely with Israel and our allies to make sure Gaza never again becomes a terrorist safe haven. He says he'll continue to promote peace through strength throughout the region. Now, I want to bring back now in the studio Dan Perry, Ariel Osseron, and Nicole Zedek. We're sitting here after months and months of reporting maybe a ceasefire is coming, maybe a hostage deal. Now it seems that this is the moment. What is the main takeaway from the viewer back home, sitting here and hearing that, oh, there's going to be a ceasefire and a hostages deal and it might kick in as soon as this evening?
Well, with the caveat that we don't know if it'll actually work and reach its full conclusion, it does appear as if Israel has agreed to end the war and pull out of Gaza in exchange for the hostages, and also to release many prisoners, some of whom are very heavy-duty terrorists. This will be basically treated with great joy in Israel, where most people want an end to the war. But I have to just remind everyone there's a huge missed opportunity here strategically. The Biden administration has been trying to somehow engineer an end to the war where Hamas is no longer in charge in Gaza, and Israel might even somehow, as part of agreeing to end the war, receive normalization with Saudi Arabia and a large military alliance with the US and maybe NATO and all the moderate Arab Sunni countries arrayed against Iran. Israel should have grabbed that and made that a condition of ending the war. Instead, now, under pressure, it ends the war, receives none of those things, and leaves Hamas in power in Gaza. And throughout this time, much of the reason for this has been that Israel doesn't want to empower the Palestinian Authority because it finds, not Israel, the right-wing government of Israel, finds there to be some benefit in having Gaza and West Bank be divided and having, indeed, Hamas be in charge in the Gaza Strip and not the West Bank. Whatever benefit might attach to that for Israel is so outweighed by what Israel has given up in order to do it this way. It's so mind-bendingly unintelligent for this to have happened that I take some comfort in what Trump says, that he will work to not have Gaza be a terrorist state again. Maybe that means that somehow there will be great pressure in the second and third stage of this deal to fix it, and to basically come up with an arrangement, and if need be, force Netanyahu's hand to accept that arrangement, where a revitalized version of the Palestinian Authority, with help from perhaps even foreign troops, Arab troops, there are many models being discussed, might take over in Gaza, and we don't end up with Hamas in charge in Gaza, which, by the way, is a missed opportunity for the Gazans as well.
Right.
I strongly doubt they want to continue being ruled by Hamas.
Well, Ariel, your thoughts?
Yeah, just a quick update. The Israeli Prime Minister's office issuing a statement saying that there are still several issues that remain unresolved in the framework of the deal. And we hope, this is according to the statement, that the details will be finalized tonight. Now, at the beginning of the broadcast, we talked about how every side is trying to show victory in these discussions. So Al Jazeera citing sources saying that it has been confirmed that the maps for the withdrawal of Israeli forces will be based on the maps that were in place prior to October 7, meaning that there are no territorial gains by Israel at the end of this agreement, that they will not remain in the Gaza Strip. As in reference to that, Prime Minister's office is saying that only due to Prime Minister Netanyahu's firm stance did Hamas cave in at the last minute on its demand to change the deployment of the forces alongside the Philadelphia corridor. In other words, even before this announcement, and we should expect after the official announcement, there is going to be many more accusations, every side trying to show that they were the ones who came out.
Ariel, it's
All right,
only temporary.
Dan Perry, Ariel Osseran, and Nicole Zedek, thank you very much for joining us this evening. That's all for this edition of Middle East Now. I'm Bianca Zanini. Thank you for watching. Next up, with more news and analysis and the Prime Minister's announcement, is The Rundown.
Bad posture. The ever-increasing hours we spend sitting, working, and even while trying to relax at home is twisting our vertebrae out of alignment and creating strain and pain on muscles, ligaments, and joints. A scientifically designed spine and back support device that uses precision biometric technology to perfectly align the back and spine for all-day comfort and support, creating perfect posture for your back every time you sit down. Now features extra-wide acupressure comfort pads as well as an extended height back panel for even more support, making it perfect for all body types. Also features a precision wing design that perfectly cradles your back and spine with amazing ergonomic support that leaves you feeling refreshed and energized even after sitting all day.
Want to stay on top of the news no matter where you are?
Introducing I-24 News' brand new news website.
On our website, you'll find all the latest articles, interviews, and live broadcasts. Everything you need to know right at your fingertips, whenever you want it.
So what are you waiting for? Download the I-24 News app today.
This is the rundown on I-24 News. I'm Benita Levine. Thank you for joining us. The waiting continues. The imminent deal, an official announcement out of Doha, said to be moments away. Donald Trump, though, taking to social media, the US president-elect, posting just a short while ago, quote, "We have a deal for the hostages in the Middle East. They will be released shortly. Thank you." Now, once it is official, this deal could see the first hostages freed in the coming days. 467 days since the Hamas terror rampage and mass abduction in southern Israel on the 7th of October. Today, 98 hostages remain in captivity. They range in age from baby Kfir Bibas, who was 9 months old at the time of the abduction, to elderly peace activists from the region. It's still not clear how many of the hostages are alive. Qatar, Egypt, and the United States have been involved in ongoing mediation efforts. Now, it's been a long road to this moment, and emotions are high, waiting for word on a deal. The first hostage truce deal was back in November 2023. Israelis have been voicing both hope for the return of the hostages in captivity all this time, and trepidation as well around the risks involved in freeing Palestinian terrorists from Israeli jails, many of whom are serving life sentences. And many are also concerned that Hamas might be able to regroup and try and target Israelis once again in the future. More in this report on the sentiments on the ground leading up to this moment.
Israelis are taking to the streets in anticipation of a ceasefire deal in Gaza, but public opinion is deeply divided. Thousands rallied in Tel Aviv on Tuesday night, urging an agreement to secure the release of hostages held by Hamas and other terror groups in Gaza.
I, Moran, a Hamas captivity survivor, appeal to you, the international community, with a simple yet urgent plea. Help us. Help us bring the hostages back home.
The status of the hostages in Gaza remains uncertain. Out of 98, at least 36 are believed to be dead. Families are left in limbo.
I don't know what's his situation, so I try not to prepare, because what I'll prepare? To a funeral and to a celebration together.
It is widely reported that 33 hostages will be released in the first stage of the deal, but questions loom about the fate of the others.
I'm a mother of Tamir. He's a young soldier, so we're probably will be left to the next stage, and we're very worried that we won't get to the next stage.
At the same time, many Israelis are strongly against the proposed deal.
It's a spit in the face for everyone who gave their life for us. They fought for nothing, and it hurts.
Some demand that all the hostages be released at once.
I would have preferred, of course, for all the hostages to be completely freed. Those who will remain will either rot or die in Hamas jails. And the price we'll pay will be exorbitant, monetized against the release of 1,600 terrorists.
Others worry the deal will enable Hamas to regroup and strike again.
We know what the reality is, that released murderers want to murder us again and again and again. And if we set more of these people out, we know what, God forbid, will be the result. Will be more dead Jews, more dead people.
I'm very disappointed in Trump. I voted for him and I had my entire family vote for him. I feel like he's not supporting us right now. When we need to make sure that we win this war.
As the nation debates the cost of negotiation, the voices of those directly affected remind us of the human stakes behind the headlines.
So for more on this potentially pivotal day in the war, we welcome to studio retired Colonel Dr. Jacques Neria, the former Deputy Head of Assessment in the Israeli Military Intelligence and former Foreign Policy Advisor to Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, and our Middle East correspondent Ariel Oseran. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Our hearts are beating just faster, waiting and waiting, this pending imminent deal. Conflicting reports, Ariel. Let's start with you on the details that are known as we wait for the official confirmation out of Doha. What are the details known about this deal?
As you mentioned, none of this is confirmed. We're basing our reporting on leaked documents. Last night, Palestinian sources leaked the proposal draft of this ceasefire agreement. We're basically talking about a three-phase deal, each phase 42 days. The first phase, the more robust phase, it will see the gradual withdrawal of Israeli forces, the cessation of hostilities between the sides, and the beginning of the release of hostages. We're talking about 33 hostages to be released in those 42 days. Fortunately, not all are expected to be alive. Israel, until the seventh day of the deal, will not know which of its hostages are alive and who is dead. And this is considered the humanitarian phase that will see the release of women, children, elderly, and those who are considered sick. Now, on the first day, Hamas will release 3 hostages. On day 7, they'll release 4 additional hostages, and then we're talking about 3 a week for each Israeli hostage. We're talking about 30 Palestinian security prisoners expected to be released. For the female soldiers, 5 IDF observers, they will be released in exchange for 50 Palestinian security prisoners. And we're talking about a total of roughly 1,000 prisoners, all the women and minors who were arrested following October 7th. Also about 200 more substantial prisoners with more substantial sentences. And again, during that period, there will be a gradual withdrawal of Israeli forces to about 6 or 7 points in a buffer zone around the Gaza Strip, including 1 point in the center of the Gaza Strip, Jocher. And in terms of humanitarian aid, the Rafah border crossing is expected to be opened, according to some reports, already tomorrow, which is unusual because it is expected to be one of the first steps on day 1 of the agreement. I'll just add that Israel's Prime Minister's office saying that there are still several issues that remain open in the ceasefire framework, and, quote, "We hope that the details will be finalized tonight." Obviously, all this is pending the official confirmation that, as we've been saying for months, will come from no other than the Qatari Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, who's expected to fill that podium that we're seeing on screen right now.
And of course, when he does, we will go live to Doha. Gentlemen, stay with us right now. I want to check in with our correspondent, Robert Swift. He joins us live from Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. And it's so close. This deal said to be imminent. Officials' announcement is still yet to come. We're waiting to see what transpires out of Doha. But what we do know are the preparations the health ministry here in Israel is involved in right now to hopefully receive and treat living hostages when they get home. Rob, lessons learned from the first time round. What can you tell us? What is known about efforts to make sure when the hostages get home, they can be treated immediately and safely?
That's correct. The health ministry has said that 7 different hospitals across Israel are on standby to receive hostages over the next days and weeks. This is based on lessons learned from the first tranche of hostage releases over a year ago. Lessons that have been learned from speaking with those hostages, from dealing with their situation, are going to be enacted. But it's worth bearing in mind that the severity of the health complications, both physical and mental, will be that much more severe this time round, with the hostages having been in captivity for a significantly longer amount of time, having been through an entire winter, not to mention the scale of combat that many of them will have survived through to get to this point, as opposed to the hostages released back in 2003, who had been in captivity for around 6 weeks. But for that reason, many of the hospitals have been put on notice, including Ichilov Hospital, which is just round the corner from us, to receive those hostages in the coming days and weeks.
Not only medical treatment, but of course psychological treatment, no doubt, as well. Rob, we've been talking here in studio about the details that have been leaked around the deal. Many, of course, are worried to make sure that this deal would secure the release of all the hostages. Talk us through some of the concerns or the obstacles about the next phases in the deal.
That's right. So the gap between phase 1 and phase 2 of the deal may be one of the biggest stumbling blocks. Now, the hostages forums have said that they see it as essential that all of the hostages, not just those who will be released during the first phase of the deal, that all of them will be released. And that namely is the male soldiers, those not included in the humanitarian phase. At the moment, there is still it has not been defined by the two sides in the negotiation as to how many Palestinian security prisoners will be released per Israeli hostage, and that in itself may become one of the stumbling blocks. But there are other details also with regard to where the IDF withdraws to. Or if during during the implementation of the ceasefire, if there are to be skirmishes on the ground, these are the sorts of things that could trip up the process, as both sides will obviously attempt to leverage the other to get the best deal moving forward. That will be seen from the 16th day of phase 1, where negotiations will begin with regards to phase 2 and on to phase 3.
And as we're speaking to you, Rob, we can see on the split screen the podium in Doha, waiting, of course, for the official announcement. And then, of course, on the other side of the screen, thousands of Israelis waiting for that official confirmation that there is, in fact, a deal. Correspondent Robert Swift, live from Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. Thank you so much. And now, back in studio, retired Colonel Dr. Jacques Nerier. It's been an agonizing wait, more than 15 months, and now it seems so close. Still, it seems some stumbling blocks that could be ironed out very soon. What is your take? What is your assessment? How are you feeling?
I would open with Churchill's sentence that this is the beginning of the end, meaning that, in fact, we are witnessing the end of the war between us and the entities on the one hand that surround us, and in Lebanon, I mean the terrorist organization. And what we can say is the failure of those organizations under the hegemony of Iran to inflict a defeat on Israel. And this didn't happen. We are witnessing a new Middle East. I don't believe, I doubt that Sinwar, when he began his offensive against Israel on the 7th of October, could ever imagine that he would be destroyed, he would be dead, and that Hamas would be destroyed militarily, and that in Lebanon, that we would have a new president in Lebanon, and the Hezbollah would be defeated in Lebanon, that we would have a new regime in Syria that would prevent Iran from interfering into Lebanon, and all this because of the beginning, because of Sinwar igniting a war against Israel. This is the sum up. I mean, the big change, a strategic change in the Middle East, and we can see that with Iran getting out of the Middle East, we see another power that is trying to insert, to come into the Middle East, Turkey, for instance. And of course, this is the opportunity for America and to come into Syria and in Lebanon, and certainly the huge comeback of Saudi Arabia into Syria politics and in Lebanon. This is the big change. Now. And another thing is that Hamas understand that this is the end of it. They understand that they cannot rule Gaza anymore. They are not accepted by anybody, and they bow to the demand that the Palestinian Authority be the one that rules in Gaza. This is a big change also. It is a big change also for Israel, for accepting the Palestinian Authority as a partner, because this is the body that would take care of the Gaza Strip, and in fact Israel would not have to do anything in that field.
We're going to take a closer look at the security implications right now. The focus is on getting the hostages back home. Stay with us. We've got more to discuss. Let's take a closer look now. For 33 hostages to be freed, the terror group is demanding the release of 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. Israel has already vetoed 72 names, with 8 being some of the most notorious terrorists in Israeli jails. That's according to the latest reports. Our Emma Siegel has the details.
As part of the ongoing negotiations for a hostage deal, Hamas has submitted a list of Palestinian prisoners it demands to have released from Israeli prisons, including senior terrorists serving life sentences in the body of Yahya Sinwar. Sinwar was the architect of the October 7th massacre and leader of Hamas in the Gaza Strip until he was killed by IDF troops in October. He was handed 4 life sentences by Israel in 1988 before his release during the Gilad Shalit deal in 2011.
Unfortunately, after Gilad Shalit deal, he was released. I myself was against, the release of Yahya Sinwar, because I knew if he will be outside, he will make a lot of trouble for the Israelis.
Now, Israel is again facing the same dilemma of releasing terrorists with the blood of Israelis on their hands and vetoing 72 names, with 8 being some of the most notorious terrorists that Israel has imprisoned. Marwan Barghouti, the former Secretary General of Fatah in the West Bank, he was arrested in 2002 after orchestrating terror attacks that killed 5 Israelis and injured several others. Barghouti has emerged as a front-runner to replace current Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. Also on the veto list is Abdallah Barghouti, a former commander of Hamas's military wing in the West Bank. Known as Hamas's engineer, he was a bomb maker responsible for the death of over 60 Israelis during the Second Intifada. He is currently serving an unprecedented 67 life sentences, which is 5,200 years. Ahmed Sadat, the former head of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, organized the assassination of former tourism minister Rehavam Ze'ev in 2001. Israel is also refusing to release Ibrahim Hamed, the mastermind behind most of the suicide bombings during the Second Intifada and who led Hamas's Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade in the West Bank during that time. He held the significant position of second-in-command within the terrorist organization in the West Bank, behind Salah al-Aruri, who was killed in Beirut in 2023. Abbas al-Sayed orchestrated the 2002 Passover massacre at a Netanyahu hotel. The devastating suicide bombing attack killed 30 and injured 140 in one of the deadliest terror attacks of the Second Intifada. Following the attack, Israel declared a state of emergency and, after calling up 20,000 IDF reservists, launched a large-scale counterterrorism raid in the West Bank. This was the first time the IDF invaded the area since the Oslo Accords. Also on Israel's veto list is Mahmoud Issa, who participated in the abduction and killing of Israeli soldier Nassim Toledano, and attempted killing of 2 other soldiers. And finally, brothers Muaz and Othman Bilal. The 2 were part of Israel's broader campaign against members of Hamas and its military networks during the early 2000s amid the Second Intifada. The brothers were accused of playing key roles in Hamas's military wing. As Israel is refusing to release these prisoners, it is unclear how this may affect the ongoing negotiations and emerging hostage deal.
Still in studio, retired Colonel Dr. Jacques Neria. There are many Palestinian security prisoners with blood on their hands, and lots of it. They are going to likely be freed in the coming days and weeks, some of them potentially going overseas, some elsewhere in the region. Your take and your concerns, the security concerns at this juncture?
Well, I ask myself, what is the choice, or what was the choice in front of our government? I think that there was no choice but to release prisoners. Of course, I mean, these are not angels. They are criminals. They're with blood on their hands. But this is the only way that we can get back our hostages. And this is, I mean, this is paramount interest of Israel. We have a moral duty to get them back. And if there is a price to pay, we are paying the price of the failure we experienced on the 7th of October. And this has to be paid. I mean, our leaders have to pay for that, and they will be asked to pay that price when the investigation will begin. Hopefully, will begin, and we'll see who are and how did they behave at that time. So, I mean, we know right now from experience that some of them, maybe not all of them, some of them will return to terrorism, but and certainly we will be prepared better this time than in the past. in order to thwart any attempt from those to return to terrorist attacks. And I think that the price will be very, very heavy for them to pay. And I think that right now, there is an interest between between us and the Palestinian Authority concerning, the security. But the Palestinian Authority has to stop also this habit of paying the families of those terrorists money that is for their exploits against Israel. This is unacceptable, and this has to be stopped immediately.
Again, we are still waiting for official confirmation out of Doha that a deal has in fact been secured. Ariel Osaran still in studio. Talk us through the process, Ariel. If there is an announcement, still the Israeli cabinet needs to approve the deal, so to speak. Give us a sense of the timeframes involved. What is likely to unfold? Yeah,
that is expected to happen tomorrow morning at 11. A discussion of the Israeli cabinet. According to the reports, the implementation of the deal will begin in the coming 2 to 3 days. Now, that is on the political echelon. In terms of preparations on the ground, the IDF is saying that it is establishing initial reception complexes in Re'im and Kerem Shalom. That is very close to the border with Gaza. Re'im is also the site of the Nova Music Festival. Now, in those initial reception complexes, the hostages will undergo medical and psychological assessments and initial security questioning. They'll be able to shower, change their clothes, and only then will they arrive at the various hospitals for more in-depth examination. Now, we have to remember that this isn't really comparable to the previous hostage release deal in November of 23, because that was after the hostages were released after 55 days in captivity. Now we're talking about 15 months. So the medical condition, the psychological condition, this is a completely different ballgame. And Israeli ministries were instructed already as early as yesterday or 2 days ago to prepare more thoroughly for the reception and treatment of these hostages, many who will need very significant recovery, both physically and mentally.
One can only imagine. Stay with us for more on exactly that as we look at how the families of the hostages are feeling ahead of this imminent deal. We now welcome Daniel Sheck, the Director of Diplomacy at the Hostage and Missing Families Forum. Thank you so much, Daniel, for speaking to us. We obviously fully understand the sensitivities around the families. One can only imagine the agony, the waiting for some kind of official confirmation. You yourself are intimately involved with working with the hostage families. One can only imagine how you are feeling. Tell us, it must be huge relief to be at this moment, so close.
Yes, definitely it is. It's a very exciting moment. I'm incidentally in the middle of a trip with 10 members of families of 10 hostages. We spent 36 hours in Brussels meeting high officials, including the new High Representative Kaja Kallas, who is a sort of a foreign minister of the EU, and other people. And I'm now in Paris with some of these families. And it's been a roller coaster emotionally in the last 36 hours with some members of this delegation who can really expect to and hope to be able to hug their loved ones in the next few days, and others who will have to wait much longer because they are parents of soldiers, of young males, and others who can only hope to receive the bodies of their loved ones because they know that they have been killed. So, of course, it's a huge step forward. It's really a huge step forward after such a long time, after the last deal was over a year ago. But it's not the end of a process. It's the beginning of a new one, because it's going to take a long time for the implementation. And I still think that if, as we hope, this deal has been signed and will be announced in the next couple of hours, our concern is that it should definitely go all the way to the end of the agreement and not stop at phase one, which is something that many of the families fear.
Obviously, much concern that all the hostages should get to come back home. No doubt about that. Daniel, President Isaac Herzog has been meeting with the head of the International Red Cross amid preparations for a deal, discussing the sensitivity of the mission, the transfer of the hostages back home. Take us back to November of 2023, the lessons learned from there, what went wrong, what needs to happen when those reunions are going to, in fact, take place. One can only imagine what that waiting will be like, what that moment will be like. Your sense? And it seems that we have unfortunately lost that line. A big pity indeed, because it's such a crucial point, and he is back on the line. Daniel, did you hear that question? What can you tell us?
I heard only a part of the question, but I can guess the rest. The Red Cross, which has been very heavily criticized and has earned that criticism, no doubt, will now play a crucial role. And you know, many of the families told me, and it's also my feeling, that we won't really believe that this is happening until we see these white cars with the Red Cross on there, on the top of them. You know, they have been denigrated a little bit. They're Uber drivers, etc. But it is a crucial phase of actually bringing out the hostages and handing them over to safety to the Israeli authorities. And our friend Osseran said something very important. It's not going to be like the last time. We are going to receive people who have gone through terrible physical and psychological hardship. And they will need much more care, certainly physical, but also psychological. So it's very important that from the very first moment that they feel the freedom, that they are in safe hands. And that is the role of the Red Cross right now.
And obviously, Daniel, also concerns about the psychological warfare, the manipulation by Hamas, by the PAJ. We remember it first time round when the lists came out, the games that were played around that, and our hearts are so heavy now as a nation. It's been more than 15 months waiting, and there are families who right now don't know if their loved ones are coming back alive or not. One cannot imagine what that must feel like.
Yes, it's terrifying. It's you know, I don't have any other word. Who can imagine this moment where you simply don't know? Even those who have had the privilege of seeing a sign of life of their loved one in the past few weeks or months, who knows what happened between then and there and now? And there are some of the families who have heard nothing since October 7th. No testimony, nobody saw them, nobody heard from them, and they simply don't know anything. So the stress and the difficulty and the hardship for the families is far from over. I mean, even the first phase of the 33 hostages is supposed to last 42 days, and every new brief little list of 3 or 4 hostages is going to keep 90-something others with their, holding their breath and hoping to see the name of their loved one on this list, and if not on this one, maybe on the next one, if not the next one, the one after. So it's still going to be a very, very difficult moment for these people, and Israeli authorities are much better prepared, and the forum is much better prepared. We're going to offer a lot of services and a lot of support for the families, because even if the hostages themselves will be taken care of by the Israeli authorities, by the hospitals, etc., the families need care. The families need attention. And that's where we come in, and we will continue to do so until the day when we can really take off this insignia that has accompanied us for 15 months now. And we simply hope that we will see the moment where we can simply take it off our clothes.
15 months facing pure evil. Incredible work by the Hostage and Missing Families Forum. We always appreciate you speaking to us. Daniel Sheck, the Director of Diplomacy. Thank you. Unbelievable to think what these families are going through. And Jacques, as we're saying, this is what evil is about. This entire discussion highlights the extent of the depravity.
The difference between us and evil. We are a people that lives for life, and we see that life is prevailing in everything we do, and in the opposite to what's happened on the other side, where they prophetize for death, for evil, and this is the big difference between us and them. Now we have to remember also that this deal will begin tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, and it will last 4 months, 112 days. This is what we are talking about. I mean, we will not finish with that deal before the next 4 months. And this is what would happen there during that period. What would happen if the government in Israel would be toppled? I mean, and Netanyahu would fall because his allies, the Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, would say no, and he will not have a majority. So is it going to be a caretaker government that will continue the deal, or are we going to elections? And if so, who will be responsible of continuation of that deal? There are lots of question marks here that are asked, and let's see. I mean, how the things are going to evolve. And this is definitely a difficult question, because we see right now the seeds of revolt coming from Ben-Gvir, coming from Smotrich, and they're trying to enlist other members of Knesset in order to disobey. I mean, the fact that this deal has to be approved by the government and by, of course, the cabinet and the government, and hopefully this will happen, and this might bring the breakdown of this government, because I mean they have declared openly that they are against, and they will vote against. Ben-Gvir has even boasted that he has several times this year brought a failure of any deal with on that issue, which is for me it's horrible to hear. But I mean, this is the way we are conducting our politics today, and things are, I mean, linked together. I mean, and what will happen on the other side?
Well, that brings me to my next question, and I'm coming to Middle East correspondent Ariel Osaran. The deal is not yet finalized. We're still waiting for official confirmation from the Qatari Prime Minister. It could be happening very shortly. If it happens, we will go live to Doha. But what do we know about the reaction so far out of Gaza, and how is the Palestinian world likely to respond, broadly speaking, to a deal right now?
Well, obviously, the average Palestinian in the street in Gaza, they're jubilant. They're happy to see the war end. They're happy, or at least they hope this marks the end of the war. They want to see an end to the destruction. They want to see an end to the killing. As for jubilation, as for the causes of this war or the implications of the Hamas onslaught on October of 23, I think we can get a good indication from actually Palestinian Authority, where Mahmoud al-Habash, advisor to Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, telling Arab media today that while the ceasefire agreement is, he says, is weak, Hamas did not achieve any strategic achievements in the Gaza Strip except for massive destruction. He said yesterday that the Gazans were 1,000,000 times better off before the October 7 attacks than afterwards, and harshly criticizing Hamas. Now, I think it's also interesting, and this goes in tandem with what the Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa said in an event in Oslo today, that only the Palestinian Authority will be the legitimate sovereign in the Gaza Strip. So Al-Habash telling Saudi Al-Hadath that there is full agreement with Egypt that the PA will take over matters in the Gaza Strip. Again, not only is this not in the draft proposal that has been leaked by Palestinian sources, but until we hear anything in the likes from the Qatari Prime Minister, or even that probably won't be in the declaration, because only on day 16 of this agreement will they begin negotiating the day after. And so a lot of this, the reality of post-war Gaza is still up in the air, but at least if we're looking as to the sentiment on the street in Gaza, joy and happiness that the war is hopefully over for them. And on the political side, harsh criticism from the PA against Hamas that they even dragged Gaza into this reality in the first place.
We're going to take a deeper look later on at the day after, what it could look like. But if there is a ceasefire deal, given your experience, Jacques, in this region, does that mean the Houthis also stop with their fire? Hezbollah is largely decapitated anyway, but do they also stand down? Do Iranian proxies say, enough, we're going to end this?
This was my next chapter. I believe that, I mean, if we follow logic and we follow their declaration, they say the moment the war is ended in Gaza, they don't have any more I would say need to prove themselves or to support Hamas. If Hamas has accepted a deal with Israel, then who are they to oppose it? So I believe that that we will witness a ceasefire also with the Houthis. Now and we will have to prepare ourselves for that threat in the future, because I mean we have known right now that out of the blue a new threat was born against Israel, and Israel was not very much prepared for that at the beginning of the war, and we have to prepare our strategic arm and our strategic response. And these are part of the lessons that this war has taught us, and we have to just remember that. And when we look at the lessons, and have to see what we can do beyond our borders, far away, at 2,000 kilometers from our border, be it in Yemen or in Iran. The next question is what would happen with Iran nuclear capability.
Because the Iranian threat, for sure, is still there. We'll take a deeper look at that in a short while. But right now, let's check back again in with our correspondent, Robert Swift. He is in Tel Aviv. And give us a sense there, Rob, of the atmosphere right now, this imminent deal, the nation waiting to hear if and when the hostages are in fact coming home.
That's right. So we've moved location slightly, and we're outside the entrance to the IDF headquarters, where behind us you might be able to see that there's a small protest taking place. I would say it's probably around about 100 people at most. And this is people protesting for what they call a global or expanded deal. Essentially, they are concerned that if the deal is confirmed tonight, one that is gradual, that it will mean that there are some hostages left inside the Gaza Strip. Hostages that the protesters are concerned will remain there. Now, we have seen previously that there is some disagreement within the hostages' families forum, where some people believe that any deal that can be achieved should be struck to get hostages out where and when is possible. But there are others who are concerned that such a deal will mean some are left behind.
And we can hear those sirens behind you now, so we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much. We will be coming back to our correspondent, Robert Swift, if there are any new developments out of Tel Aviv. Thank you so much. Now, earlier on in the broadcast, we spoke a little bit about the U.S. impact on what is happening right now. So let's take a deeper look at Pete Hegseth. He could well be the next U.S. Defense Secretary, the Army veteran and former Fox News host, taking center stage at a fiery Senate hearing. Democrats grilling him on his past controversies and previous remarks about women serving in combat. And when it comes to the war here, the ongoing war here, he says he supports, quote, Israel killing every last member of Hamas. Senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim is in Washington and filed this report.
Well, the rocky nomination process for Donald Trump's selection to be defense secretary took another turn on Tuesday. Former Fox News host Pete Hegseth has been dogged by allegations of sexual misconduct, excessive drinking, and financial mismanagement, as well as just a lack of qualification for the job. He went in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee on Tuesday, where he was battered by Democrats and supported, as expected, by most Republicans on the committee. The radical left-wing group Code Pink objected to Hegseth's nomination several times during the hearing, calling him a misogynist and a Christian Zionist. Senator Tom Cotton asked Hegseth whether he is a Christian Zionist. Hegseth proudly responded in the affirmative. Cotton then asked him whether he supports Israel's war in Gaza. Here was his answer.
Senator, I do. I support Israel destroying and killing every last member of Hamas.
Well, because Hegseth's personal problems took up much of the meeting, there was not much policy discussion in the end, though Hegseth did indicate that the U.S. needed to steer away from the Middle East and more toward China. He was also asked about his stance on counter-extreme measures within the U.S. Army to root out the recruitment of neo-Nazis and white nationalists, a policy supported by the Anti-Defamation League. Hegseth indicated those concerns that led to those changes were overblown and should be eliminated. Hegseth was introduced at his hearing by Norm Coleman, the former Minnesota senator, who now is the chair of the Republican Jewish Coalition. Reporting from Washington, Mike Wagenheim, I-24 News.
Retired Colonel Dr. Jacques Nerier, your reaction to what we just heard there?
Well, you know, he's tougher than most of us. I don't think that you could find here an Israeli. An average Israeli would tell you that we would fight till the last one of Hamas. We know that Hamas is a movement. It's a movement, political movement, military movement, and it's enough to defeat him or to isolate him. I don't think that we have the means to go after the last Mohican, the last fighter of Hamas. But basically, we are encouraged by this attitude of this administration, meaning that whatever will happen in the area, we would be certain to have the support of the United States, and certainly in the issue of Iran nuclear facilities, because this is the next topic. This is the flashpoint. This is the thing that is the most important for the next 10 years, or maybe even more for the next generation. If we don't take care of that threat, this would be a danger for the existence of the state of Israel.
So you alluded to it a little bit earlier. What does that look like? How does Israel and the new U.S. administration deal with the Iranian nuclear threat?
Well, you know, Israel has been talking right now that these last days that we have the capability to hit deep into Iran. We have proven that in the past. We have done that in the past. But seriously, this is not enough. When we just compare what happened with the Houthis, we sent a flotilla, more than 100 planes with 25 bombers. With 25 bombers, you don't win a war. You can hit hard and do damage. But the same goes for Iran. Iran is 90 times the size of Israel. We are talking about a country of 80 million. We are talking about facilities all around Iran. It would mean that we would have to go there back and forth. And if we don't have the backing and the support of the American Air Force and the American might, then things would be much more difficult for Israel. And I think that would be difficult for Israel to withstand that alone. And certainly if there's a response from Iran with the ballistic missiles fired at Israel.
There's been so much made, Ariel, of this date, the 20th of January, Donald Trump's inauguration, and already reports suggesting that his Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, not only had put pressure on all players, but specifically on Benjamin Netanyahu to get to this point, put pressure on Israel to secure a deal right now. Whether confirmed or not, what do you make of the U.S. pressure post-Monday on how things are going to unfold in this part of the world?
Look, if we take things at face value, for 15 months, the Biden administration failed to reach this point in time. And the incoming Trump administration managed to push this over the finish line even before entering the White House. Those are the facts. Whether you like that or not, that's up to every person individually to determine. But the Trump effect has had implications not only on this Gaza ceasefire, these negotiations, but also broadly in the region. We just discussed about Iran. There's different talk about potential Israeli-American strikes on Iran's nuclear program, and Iran now is engaged in drills air defense drills surrounding their nuclear facilities. So, like it or not, the Trump effect has real implications, a real effect on the Middle East. We're seeing this in the Gaza negotiations. It will be very interesting to see once Donald Trump enters the White House, inaugurated next week. This will be as the ceasefire is expected to be in its first days. And so how will this implementation move forward? There are many concerns in Israel that it won't make it to the second phase. And so that will be perceived as a failure on behalf of the Trump administration, that they only managed to bring a partial deal. So I think incoming President Trump has his own issues he wants to prove. That would be seeing this ceasefire deal implemented in its entirety. If you ask some members of the current Israeli coalition whether they want to see that, I'm not so sure, even though they were highly supportive of Donald Trump during his race to the White House.
And let us not forget that the plan, the big plan design that Donald Trump put during his first mandate talks about two-state solution, not one state. Not this is a different ball game, and I think that the opposition that is part of this coalition today, the right-wing one, have to remember that that issue, that Donald Trump is not talking about eliminating a Palestinian state.
And on that, if we're looking at differences between the previous Trump administration to the incoming one, last time his special advisor on the Middle East was his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, with a Jewish background. Now he has Steve Witkoff, obviously the envoy, but he has his special Middle East advisor is his in-law, Mas'ad Boulos. He's Lebanese, Christian, different orientation than Jared Kushner, and I think that will also help in shaping a different take by the incoming Trump administration regarding the Middle East.
Last time round as well, Trump was heavily involved, of course, in the historic Abraham Accords, and that has taken a little bit of a back burner, so to speak, in recent times. And obviously that could be coming back again. And of course, we can't discuss that without mentioning Saudi Arabia down the line.
Definitely so, because, we have seen right now, we are witnessing a huge comeback of Saudi Arabia to the Middle East. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Syrian one, the new one, was invited to visit Saudi Arabia. There was a visit of Saudi Arabia to Syria. Saudi Arabia has been involved in the election of the Lebanese president and with the election and the nomination of the prime minister. So there's a huge comeback of Saudi Arabia, and I think that this is the time that the American administration will try to convince Israel that it is time to compromise on the Palestinian issue in order to get a bigger piece of the cake. And the bigger piece of the cake is normalization with Saudi Arabia, with Sudan, of course, when the Sudan will become again.
They have their own problems right now.
Somali, and the Trump administration has 10 Arab countries on their agenda, and this is a huge transformation of the Middle East.
If you're just joining us right now, we are waiting to go to Qatar, and let's do it right now. Let's go to Doha. Here's the Qatari Prime Minister. And it seems we have a problem with that line. As soon as he comes forward, we certainly will be bringing that to you live. The Qatari Prime Minister, Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani, is about to speak. We can see him making his way to the podium. Much on the cards, much at stake. Let's go live to Doha.
Could hear what's happening.
great pleasure in Qatar, Egypt, and the United States to announce the success of the joint mediation efforts and the fact that the two belligerents in the Gaza Strip have reached a deal on the prisoner and the hostage swap and announce a ceasefire in the hopes of reaching a permanent ceasefire between the two sides, as well as allowing the access of large quantities of relief aid to the Palestinian brothers in the Gaza Strip. First off, I would like to thank our partners in the Arab Republic of Egypt, the United States of America, notably the envoy to the Middle East of the President-elect, Steve Witkoff, as well as the MENA coordinator at the U.S. National Security Council, Mr. Brett McGurk, for their efforts that contributed to push these negotiations forward and reach this deal. I would also like to express my deepest thanks and gratitude to our brothers from the Arab Republic of Egypt and His Excellency the Minister Hassan Rashad, who have contributed and made serious efforts in collaboration with their Qatari partners in order to make this deal a success. With the approval of both sides and the negotiators on this deal in order to finalize all executive measures for tonight, and after that we will be taking all the internal measures, the Israeli government will be taking the internal measures, after which the agreement will enter into effect on Sunday, January 19th. The exact timing will be identified later. The phase 1 of the agreement will go on for 42 days, and it will include a ceasefire and the withdrawal of Israeli forces to the east away from populated areas. Israeli forces will then be positioned along the Gaza border, and which will allow for the swap of prisoners as well as the swap of remains and the return of the displaced people to their residences. This will also facilitate the travel of wounded and sick people in order to receive treatment. Phase 1 also includes an increased flow of relief and humanitarian aid to all parts of the Gaza Strip, as well as the rehabilitation of hospitals, health centers, bakeries, and allowing the entry of fuel and civil defense equipment, as well as basic necessities for displaced people who lost their houses as a result of the war. In phase 1, Hamas will be releasing 33 Israeli captives, including civilian women and female recruits, as well as children, elderly people, as well as civilian ill people and wounded, in return for a number of prisoners who are being held in Israeli prisons. Regarding phases 2 and 3, the details will be finalized during the implementation of phase 1. The state of Qatar reaffirms the necessity of both sides committing to the implementation of all 3 stages of the agreement in order to prevent civilian bloodshed and in order to shield our region from the consequences of this conflict and ensure that we have lasting peace in the region. Qatar will continue its joint efforts with the Arab Republic of Egypt and the United States of America to ensure that all sides are following through with their commitments and engagements and ensure that all 3 stages will be implemented. We look forward to seeing regional and international efforts coming together in order to assist with relief and humanitarian aid and supporting the United Nations in its attempts to enter aid into the Gaza Strip. Qatar will spare no effort to offer help to the families in the Gaza Strip and doing everything that's necessary to alleviate the suffering of the residents of the Strip. Since October 8th, we in the state of Qatar saved no effort with the constant under the constant and watchful eye of His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. We worked day and night in order to reach this moment, and since our mediation efforts succeeded last November to guarantee the release of 109 hostages in return for a number of Palestinian prisoners, we have been working continuously in order to prevent bloodshed and put an end to the war machine and restore hope for our region in a prosperous future that will allow our people to dream of a better future. For 411 days, meetings and contacts continued with our partners and both sides of the conflict until we reached this long-awaited moment today. However, today begins a responsibility for both sides, who will be supported by the international community and the mediators in order to achieve complete success. And this is what we will be focusing on in the coming days and weeks. I would also like to express our thanks to all our partners in the region and internationally for their support to our efforts all the way until we reach this deal. And in conclusion, I would also like to remind our brothers in the Gaza Strip that Qatar will continue to offer support to our brothers in Palestine, and that this happens under the close watch and the watchful eye of His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, day and night, hour by hour, and minute by minute. We would like to tell them we give thanks to Allah for bringing us to this moment today, and hopefully this will be the last page in the days of the war. We would also like to call upon all sides to fully commit to all the articles of this agreement and to continue implementing these procedures and measures in accordance with the agreement. The state of Qatar will continue working jointly with its partners in order to make sure that this deal is implemented in full and that calm returns to the Gaza Strip in a sustainable manner, and we will never give up the people of Gaza. Thank you.
Breaking news, it's official, there is a deal. Day 467 of the war, Qatar's Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani making the official announcement out of Doha. 30 seconds, Jacques, your reaction.
As I said at the beginning of today, this is the beginning of the end. This is the end, the beginning of the end of the war. And it's time to wrap up the war and to begin to learn the lessons, to analyze what happened there. There's a new reality that has been created because of what happened on the 7th of October. This is a thing that Sinwar didn't even imagine that would happen.
Jacques Naria, thank you so much. Ariel Osran, appreciate you being with us for this breaking news edition of The Rundown. I'm Benita Levine. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned. Our coverage continues.
You live in Israel or you are preparing for your Aliyah? Congratulations. You have a smartphone? Perfect. Download the Olim app for free and discover everything we have to offer. Booking medical and administrative appointments, bills paying, debt verification, instant translation, contractor recommendation, request tracking, and much more. And if you can't manage it on your own, our team speaks your language and assists you with all your procedures in Israel, starting from 199 shekels per month, unlimited and for the whole family. Don't hesitate any longer. Download the app or contact us.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
התחלה של משהו. צריכים לראות את הצד הנכון, הטוב. וזה מה שאני עושה, אני מסתכל רק על הצד הטוב. וזה התחלה של באמת החזרה של כולם הביתה.
כלומר, גם אם בנקודת הזמן הזו אנחנו לא רואים את הסוף, ונאמר ביושר, לא רואים את הסוף,
לא רואים את
צריך
הסוף.
להתחיל מבחינתך.
אבל רואים שמתחיל משהו. עד לפני כמה דקות, גם את זה לא ראינו.
נכון.
אז צריכים לראות את הדברים החיוביים, הטובים, להמשיך לתמוך במשפחות, להמשיך להילחם עד שהאחרון מהחטופים יחזור הביתה.
אתה מאז שחרורך, חילוצך מהשבי, בעצם מגיע לכאן ומדבר ומסתובב למען המשפחות. החל מיום ראשון תצטרך גם להיות למען חטופים משוחררים.
מי שיצטרך אותי, אני אהיה שם. בכל דבר. לא בכוח, לא,
כן.
אני לא מכניס את עצמי לשום מקום. איפה שיקראו לי וירצו אותי, אני אהיה.
יש הרבה ישראלים שצופים במתרחש יחד איתנו ולא לגמרי יודעים מה להרגיש. לא יודעים מה להרגיש. מסר שלך לישראלים בערב באמת מתוח והיסטורי.
אני ממשיך עם אותה דעה מקודם, שצריכים לראות רק את הטוב, צריכים להמשיך להילחם, לתמוך במשפחות, ואני גם מבקש מכולם להמשיך לדבר עם החטופים, למסור להם כמה שאנחנו מחכים להם וכמה שאנחנו איתם. הם ירגישו את זה, אני בטוח שהם מרגישים את זה. אז אני, מכל מה שאני יכול, זה לא רק להתפלל, כמו לדבר איתם, ממש להיות בקשר איתם. כן.
כלומר, כשאתה היית שם ואנחנו דיברנו אליך, הרגשת.
אני אפילו הרגשתי בגוף משהו מוסר, משהו שלא הבנתי בדיוק מה זה. תמיד אמרתי שהחוסר החיבוק של הנכדים שלי, אבל זה בעצם שהנכדים חשבו עליי. אני הרגשתי את זה.
הרגשת את ההיעדר של החיבוק.
כן. אז אני אומר, יש משהו, יש כוחות שעוברים בכל העולם. אז הם ירגישו אותנו. אני עושה את זה.
לואיס הר, ממש לוליין תהום, גם רקדן תהום, שהנה חזרת אלינו עם המסר הזה, מירי, עם ההסתייגויות, עם הספקות, מסר ברור, שנצא לדרך.
לא לאבד את התקווה שרואים פה מאחורה. כן, זה לכולנו.
לואיס הר, תודה. תודה שהיית איתנו. מירי.
תודה לכם.
חזרה אלייך.
תודה רבה לכם. תודה, אלי, תודה גם ללואיס. גיא עזריאל, אנחנו שומעים שבקרוב תהיה הצהרה של הנשיאים ביידן והרצוג.
כן, אני חושב שאפשר לראות כבר תמונות של הבית הלבן שם. הנשיא ביידן צפוי לשאת דברים, אולי לא באופן מתואם עם נשיאנו הרצוג, שאמור לדבר ממש בעוד פחות מרבע שעה. אנחנו נביא לכם את הדברים של הרצוג, גם של ביידן, אם לא יחפפו ביניהם. בוודאי אירוע משמעותי מאוד עבור ביידן בסיום כהונתו. ביידן, עם כל הביקורת שהייתה כאן בישראל על האיום באמברגו נשק, בואו נאזין.
הנה הדברים של הנשיא ביידן.
אחרי 15 חודשי טרור, 15 חודשים של סבל לאנשי עזה, בקרוב החטופים ישובו הביתה למשפחותיהם. ההסכם הזה שהבאתי בחודש מאי, שאומץ על ידי מועצת הביטחון של האו"ם. העסקה מחולקת לשלושה שלבים. הראשונה כוללת הפסקת אש ונסיגה של כוחות צה"ל מהאזורים המיושבים בעזה, ושחרור של חלק מהחטופים המוחזקים בידי חמאס, כולל האנשים, המבוגרים והפצועים. אני וסגנית הנשיא לא יכולים לחכות לקבל אותם חזרה בתמורה לשחרור אסירים פלסטינים. גם הם יוכלו לחזור. בכל האזורים של עזה גם תושבים יוכלו לחזור. אנשים יוכלו לחזור ולקבל סיוע הומניטרי. נעשה את כל ההכנות להתקדם לשלב 2, שהוא הפסקת אש קבועה. התוכנית אומרת שאם המשא ומתן נמשך מעבר ל6 שבועות, הפסקת האש תימשך כל עוד השיחות נמשכות. אנחנו מחויבים לדאוג לכך שהשיחות יימשכו ככל שידרש. ברגע ששלב 2 מתחיל, יהיה שחרור החטופים הנותרים, כולל כל הגברים הנותרים והחיילים. ואז הפסקת האש הזמנית תהפוך לקבועה. בשלב 3, כל גופות החטופים יוחזרו גם כן. ואז נתחיל בתהליך בנייה מחדש של עזה. זהו ההסכם שהצגתי באביב שעבר. היום ישראל וחמאס הסכימו למתווה הזה. לקראת סיום המלחמה. אלו שליוו את המאמצים יכולים להעיד שזה לא היה קל. זה אחד מהמשאים ומתנים הקשים ביותר שעבדתי עליהם. בגלל הלחץ שישראל בנתה על חמאס עם התמיכה של האמריקאים. מנהיג חמאס חוסל. ההתקפות האיראניות על ישראל נכשלו בזכות פעילות הקואליציה. הוריתי לספינות המלחמה האמריקאיות להגיע לכאן. פגענו או הרסנו את מערכות ההגנה האווירית של איראן כדי למנוע מלחמה כוללת. ארצות הברית ארגנה גם קואליציה של 22 מדינות לתקוף את החות'ים ולהגן ממתקפות הטילים כנגד ישראל. ואז חיזבאללה, עוד תומך של חמאס, הוחלשה משמעותית. ההנהגה שלה הושמדה. ישראל חתמה על הפסקת אש מולם, ואז לבנון מינתה נשיא חדש. התחיל פרק חדש עבור האנשים הלבנונים. כל ההתפתחויות האלו באזור, שארצות הברית סייעה להם, שינו את המשוואה. ועכשיו חמאס חלש הרבה יותר, איראן חלשה יותר. חלשה יותר מכפי שהייתה מזה עשורים. אחרי יותר מ-15 חודשים של מלחמה. מנהיגי חמאס הבכירים נהרגו. מרבית התשתית הצבאית של חמאס גם כן נהרסה. וכעת הם מוכנים לשחרר חטופים. לא הייתה כל דרך אחרת למלחמה הזו להסתיים מבלי שחרור חטופים. אני מסופק שהגענו לכאן לטובת ישראל והמשפחות, לטובת האזרחים בעזה והסבל שלהם במהלך המלחמה הזו. יותר מדי אנשים נהרגו, יותר מדי קהילות נהרסו. האנשים בעזה יכולים סוף סוף להתאושש ולבנות את עצמם מחדש. התנ"ך אומר, ברכו את עושי השלום. בזכות קבוצה של דיפלומטים אמריקאים שעבדו ללא הרף. מונה גם את ג'ייק סאליבן, היועץ לביטחון לאומי, את ברט מגרק, את עמוס הוכשטיין וסגנית הנשיא, שעבדו יחד עבור ההסכם הזה. ההסכם הזה תובח תחת ההנהגה הממשל שלי, אבל ייושם תחת הממשל הבא. זו הייתה תקופה של סערה במזרח התיכון. כעת חברינו חזקים, האויבים שלנו חלשים יותר. יש אפשרויות לעתיד. ללבנון יש הזדמנות לעתיד, גם לסוריה. עתיד ללא אסד. לאנשים הפלסטינים, גם כן, אפשרויות לעתיד. אפשרויות לנורמליזציה במזרח התיכון. לישראל ולכל שכנותיה הערבים, כולל ערב הסעודית. בניו דלי ב-23 הצגתי את החזון שלי, החזון הכלכלי שלי. מהמזרח הרחוק לאירופה. זה יוכל להפוך עכשיו למציאות. אנחנו מעבירים הזדמנות אמיתית לממשל הבא, לעתיד טוב יותר. אני מקווה שהם ייקחו אותו. חברי ג'ורג' מיטשל מהסנאט, שעבד על השלום בצפון אירלנד, 700 ימים של כישלון ויום אחד של הצלחה, כך הוא תיאר את המשא ומתן בצפון אירלנד. היו לנו ימים רבים של כישלון, מאז חמאס התחיל את המלחמה הנוראית הזו. עכשיו, אחרי יותר מ-440 יום של מלחמה, היום הזה של ההצלחה הגיע. אלוהים יברך את החטופים ואת החיילים וכל אלו שעבדו למען השלום. הנשיא נשאל לגבי יישום העסקה תחת האדמיניסטרציה, תחת הממשל הבא. כמה קרדיט תיתן לנשיא טראמפ על העסקה הזו? זהו בדיוק המתווה שאני הצגתי. הגענו לכך שהעולם אימץ את המתווה. זכה לתמיכה של ישראל אחרי שחמאס נפגע, והתנאים הבשילו. שלישית, המתווה הזה יושם על ידי הממשל הבא. הנחיתי לערוך תיאום צמוד עם הממשל. כך עושים נשיאים אמריקאים. נשאל לגבי החטופים האמריקאים. כל הפרטים המדויקים של החטופים והגופות יגיעו מאוחר יותר. תודה רבה.
אלה הדברים של הנשיא האמריקני ביידן. הוא נשאל, אפשר להגדיר, אני חושבת, גיא, את הנאום הזה של העונה שוב?
הוא שאל אם מדובר בבדיחה.
הוא שאל אם מדובר בבדיחה, על מה? מה הוא שאל?
נשאל לגבי הקרדיט, לא או לנשיא טראמפ.
אז זה בדיוק רציתי לומר, נראה לי שאפשר לומר שזה נאום
הרבה קרדיט לטראמפ לא היה שם.
לא, זה לגמרי נאום לקיחת הקרדיט של ביידן על העסקה הזאת, עוד לפני שהוא נשאל, זה היה מאוד מאוד ברור, הוא אמר שוב ושוב שזה המתווה שלו, עוד ממאי, כדי חלילה שטראמפ לא יקבל את
כן, הרבה
הקרדיט על זה.
ג'נטלמניות לא הייתה שם, אבל אולי קשה להאשים אותו לאחר היחס של טראמפ אליו, בוודאי במערכת הבחירות האחרונה, למרות שהתמודד
אני אגיד לך מה עוד לא שמעתי, גיא, בנאום הזה, תקן אותי אם אני טועה, הוא דיבר על הסבל של אנשי עזה שעברו גיהנום, הוא דיבר על קהילות שנהרסו, הוא אמר שעכשיו בעזה יוכלו להתאושש ולבנות מחדש. לא שמעתי אותו מדבר על הסבל של העם היהודי, של הישראלי. הוא לא דיבר על ההתחלה
דיבר על
של 7
החטופים,
באוקטובר.
משפחות החטופים, דיבר על הסבל של המלחמה, אבל כן, לא ראינו התייחסות ספציפית במקרה הזה. לפחות לא שמענו כמה שאנחנו יכולנו להאזין לדברים שלו. התייחסות כמובן למה שהוביל כל הסיפור הזה, לסבל של 7 באוקטובר, לאיום על הקהילות בעוטף עזה. הרצח של הצעירים במסיבה בנובה, חשוב מאוד שנזכור איך הגענו למלחמה הזו.
אבל הדגיש שחמאס הוא זה שפתח בה.
כן, כן, זה בוודאי, כך אפשר לצפות מהאמריקאים, הם בוודאי לצידנו, אבל חשוב מאוד להזכיר לכולם, גם בוודאי במעמד הזה של נשיא ארצות הברית, איזה סבל היה כאן ב7 באוקטובר, מדוע ישראל נלחמת את המלחמה הזו, וזה חשוב מאוד, כיוון שרבים מאלו שמבקרים את ישראל על הלחימה שלה בעזה, עם כל הסבל האנושי שם, שוכחים מדוע ישראל נלחמת כדי למנוע עוד 7 באוקטובר.
הוא גם חזר על עצמו ואמר שההסכם יביא להפסקת אש קבועה ברצועה, ואני רוצה רגע להתייחס לתמונות שבזמן שהנשיא ביידן, הנשיא האמריקני, מדבר, אנחנו רואים תמונות, ברוך ואסף, מעזה של מחבלי חמאס, לא רק אזרחים עקורים, שמסתובבים ברחובות עם נשקים שלופים. נזכיר, הפסקת האש עדיין לא נכנסה לתוקף ותיכנס לתוקפה רק ביום ראשון. הם לא חוששים שצה"ל יבוא ויחסל אותם?
אומרים שזה גדודי עזתים אל-קסאם. זאת אומרת, הזרוע הצבאית של חמאס מסתובבים ברחובות, הוא אומר, אנחנו נמצאים בשטח ואנחנו עוד נשאר בשטח, וזה בעצם תמונת הניצחון שחמאס רוצה להציג. עוד לפני כן, בחגיגות השמחה, גם כן, ברצועת עזה צעקו, הזכירו את קרב חייבר, אמרו על ירושלים, צועדים מיליוני שהידים, כל הקריאות האלה שאנחנו בעצם יודעים ומכירים, זה חלק מחגיגות השמחה של תושבי רצועת עזה להפסקת האש הזאת. אם ברוך רוצה להתייחס, יש התייחסות של ראש ממשלת קטר לגבי ההסכם ולגבי ההפרה של ההסכם. האם יהיה ההפרה של ההסכם? מי יערוב לכך שיהיה פתרון? למי בעצם יפנו לגבי כל הפרה של ההסכם? הוא אומר, המכניזם הזה שהוא קטר, ארצות הברית ומצרים, הם אלה שידאגו לפתור את ההפרות, והוא אומר, אנחנו מצפים לשמירה ומחויבות של כל הצדדים, והוא אומר, אני לא אכנס לפרטים, היה הרבה לחץ בימים האחרונים, ובסופו של דבר הגענו להסכם הזה, ואנחנו מקווים שההסכם הזה, הוא חוזר על זה, יוביל להפסקת אש קבועה, וגם למדינה פלסטינית, זאת אומרת, לשלום. זאת האמירה של קטר.
כן.
אבל לצד התמונות האלו של עז-א-דין אל-קסאם בעזה, ברחוב, חמאס הוציאה לפני זמן קצר הודעה, גם היא מקבלת את ההסכם, וחמאס אומרת, ההסכם הוא תוצאה של האיתנות האגדית של עמנו, 15 חודש, הישג לעם, מפנה בסכסוך בין ישראל לפלסטינים, בדרך לעודה ותחריר, בדרך לשיבה ושחרור. כמובן שמודיעים, חליל אל-חיה, זה שסינואר מינה אותו מבעוד מועד להיות בחול כדי לדברר, חליל אל-חיה כפי הנראה נואם בעוד שעה, שעה וקצת. אני מניח שהוא יחזור על ההודעה הזו של חמאס.
כן, תודה רבה. אנחנו מיד נעבור להצהרת הנשיא הרצוג, אבל קודם, שלמה מנצור, בן 86, ועודד ליפשיץ, בן 84, מוכרים בציבור כחטופים המבוגרים ביותר בשבי חמאס. יקיריהם שמחכים בבית, הבנים, הנכדים ואפילו נינה אחת, מאמינים שלמרות הזמן שחלף לסיוט הזה, שהחל ב7 באוקטובר, יהיה סוף טוב. כתבתנו מאי לורנס ביסמוט פגשה את הילדים הקטנים והגיבורים בשתי המשפחות שלא מוותרים ורוצים רק דבר אחד, לראות ולחבק שוב את סבא. הנה הכתבה.
שיחזור הביתה בבטחה, שישמור על עצמו שם, שלא יאבד את זה, שלא יוותר.
כל אחד שואל אותך, ראיתי את סבא ברשימה, בינתיים כאילו אנחנו לא יודעים הרבה, עד שלא אומרים לנו, האנשים שמלווים אותנו.
הקשר בין סבא לנכדיו ובין סבא רבא לניניו הוא קשר מיוחד שמבוסס על אהבה וזיכרונות. אבל מה קורה כשהחוט הזה נקרע באכזריות? דרך הסיפורים של יובל, סגי ולילו, נכיר את הגעגוע החיבור הייחודי והתקווה לחזרתם של הסבים האהובים שנמצאים בשבי חמאס מאז 7 באוקטובר.
למה את הכי מתגעגעת?
אליו ולקיבוץ.
בכיתה י"א אני גרתי בבית שלו ושל סבתא כמה חודשים, והוא באמת דאג לי לכל דבר שהייתי צריכה. בין אם זה שיהיה לי מי להיות אחר הצהריים, אוכל, היה מלווה אותי כל בוקר להסעה.
הייתי ממש סביב בובסוג ורציתי לייצר איזה סוג של בובסוג מעץ, וסבא הוא נגר, יש לו נגריה. ולקחנו יום משלנו, ממש זמן איכות, והוא עזר לי ליצור בובת בובסוג מעץ. זה היה בין הרגעים הכי כיפים שהיו לי.
סבא אוהב, כיפי, נותן הכל, הוא מתחשב, הוא אוהב ללמד דברים חדשים. כמו לנגן, תמיד היינו מנגנים על הפסנתר ביחד, כי ניגנתי על פסנתר, אז הוא לימד אותי מלא שירים על פסנתר, אבל עכשיו אני כבר שכחתי כי הוא לא פה.
אני עברתי לגור בקיבוץ בארי, וכשעברתי הייתי צריכה אופניים. אז הוא לקח אותי לנגריה לראות את כל הזוגות אופניים ולבחור אופניים, והוא עזר לי לצבוע את הדירה. באמת, כל מה שהייתי צריכה, כל מה שהיינו צריכים.
תבוא, אנחנו מחכים לך יותר מדי שנים.
אוי!
אנחנו השתגענו, אין לנו יותר פנים.
גם אני מאוד מתגעגעת לטיולים שלנו עם הקנואית. נסענו כזה בשדות שאפשר כזה לצאת מהשער ולקטוף כזה גזר או תפוחי אדמה, אז תמיד כזה יצאנו עם הקנואית כזה.
נשמע סבא רבא מאוד פעיל.
נכון, היה לו המון כוח.
סגיב הוא הספר של סבא.
גם.
אין לו כל כך הרבה מה לספר, אבל...
כי יש קרח.
אבל זה היה הזמן איכות שלהם.
כל איזה 2-3 הייתי מספר אותו קצת, את השערה וחצי. הוא היה משחיל לי כסף גם, וזה מאוד חסר.
אנחנו חוזרים לאותה שבת ההיא, יום אחד ששינה עבורם את כל מה שהם הכירו.
עכשיו התקשרנו, סבא וסבתא.
רציתי לדעת מה קורה, לוודא שהם בממ"ד, ואמרתי לו, בבקשה תצאו מהממ"ד, זה נראה לא רגיל.
פתאום כזה באיזה 6:30, 6:29 היה אזעקה. הייתי כזה, כנראה שזה רק בתל אביב וזה, ואז כזה ראו ממש בחדשות שקורה דברים. ואז גם יום אחרי גם סיפרו לי שסבא רבא שלי וסבתא רבתא שלי נחטפו.
ואנחנו היינו גם בממ"ד עד ראשון בצהריים שפינו אותנו. באזור השעה 2 לפנות בוקר בין שבת לראשון, אמא קיבלה טלפון מסבתא.
נודע על הדבר שהיא ראתה אותו, שהוא נחטף, על הכל בעצם.
האמנת אז שאנחנו נמצא את עצמנו אחרי כל כך הרבה זמן במצב הזה?
בכללי, לא. חשבתי שזה יעבור איזה כמה ימים, יחזירו אותם וזהו. לא חשבתי שזה עכשיו יהיה שנה שלמה.
את כועסת?
קצת.
טיוטת הסכם הפסקת האש בעזה הועברה לארגון הטרור חמאס, המתווכות מביעות אופטימיות.
רגעים דרמטיים לקראת עסקה.
בזמן שבקטר נראה שחתימה על עסקה לשחרור חטופים קרובה מתמיד.
עד שאני לא אראה את כולם פה, אני לא מתייחס.
אנחנו פוגשים אותם שברקע הדיווחים על עסקה אפשרית לשחרור החטופים. ההמתנה עבורם הופכת לכמעט בלתי אפשרית. המשפחות כבר חוו שוב ושוב את ההבטחות והדיבורים שמתעוררים בכל פעם מחדש. משאירים אותן בין תקווה לשברון לב.
אנחנו לא תמיד יודעים את הדברים לפני. לפעמים אנחנו מגלים מהתקשורת. וכל השיתופים וכל הדברים גורמים לנו להמון טלטלות נפשיות. תנו לנו רגע להבין מה קורה לפני שאתם פונים אלינו ולפני שאתם משתפים, פשוט לחשוב פעמיים מה זה יכול לעשות לנו.
מדברים על זה שיש עסקה, אבל אין עסקה. צריך להיות עסקה. אף אחד לא באמת יודע אם תהיה או לא. כאילו, זה לא שאני עכשיו אלך לחברים שלי, זה חבר שכזה, וואו, יש עסקה, הולכת, עסקה. אני שומרת את זה לעצמי, ויקרה מה שיקרה.
את מאמינה שזה יקרה?
כן.
יוצא לך לפעמים מדמיין כזה את הרגע שסבא רבא שהיה חוזר? מרשה לעצמך? איך זה נראה?
שהוא חוזר בבית חולים, ברור. כזה, כולם פשוט מסביבו, מחבקים אותו.
אין, שהוא חוזר, אנחנו לא עוזבים אותו. לא עוזבים אותו, רק איתו.
ופשוט בוכים, כאילו מאושר,
אני זה גם בא לי בחלום. בין הסיוטים זה בא לי גם בחלום.
קרה מלא דברים מאז.
כן, קרה מלא דברים.
אז מה הדבר הראשון שאת תספרי לו?
שעברתי לחטיבה.
אוקיי.
ושכבר היה לי פעמיים יום הולדת כשהוא לא היה. יום הולדת 11 ובת מצווה.
I am the great-granddaughter of a great Lifshitz. I miss you very much and I want you back home. Please bring them all home and please don't lose hope.
לילו, יובל ושגיב עברו ב-466 ימים מסע התבגרות שאחרים חווים בשנים ארוכות. בעודם צעירים ואפילו מתבגרים, הם נגררו למסע שמטבעו שייך לעולם המבוגרים.
כל כמה זמן את באה לפה?
כמעט כל שבת כזה. יש פעמים שזה באמת גם too much. באמת הרבה אנשים שבאים וצורכים, אבל זה גם ממש כזה, זה מרים.
זה מרגישה עטופה?
כן.
יצא לנו להיות במשלחות.
להעלות את ההסברה שם.
להסביר ולנום, ואני עושה סרטונים בטיקטוק, סרטוני הסברה, קצת סרטונים הומוריסטיים טיפה.
גם אם לרגע הבגרות שלהם יכולה להטעות, הם עדיין ילדים ונערים. וכמו בני דורם, הם יודעים לתקשר את התחושות שלהם בדרכים הישירות והכנות שמאפיינות אותם. בלי פילטרים, עם המילים, המחוות והרגשות שאופיינים לשפה של הדור שלהם, גם כשהם מתמודדים עם המסע הכואב ביותר.
כשסבא רבא שלך יחזור, תבואי איתו לפה, תראי לו את כל הדבר הזה שעשיתם בשבילו. איך הוא יגיב, את חושבת? שהוא ילך ברחוב ויראו את התמונות שלו.
אני חושבת שהוא יהיה גאה בארץ שלנו ובכללים.
בך?
גאה בי, גאה במשפחה, גאה בכולם.